Al Capone, Napoleon Bonaparte, Vladimir Lenin, Vincent van Gogh, Howard Hughes, and Adolf Hitler. All of these figures of history, good or atrocious, had something in common. And that commonality is what we're going to talk about today. So if you came up with some form of syphilis, congratulations, you got today's trivia question correct. Treponema pallidum, the causative agent of syphilis, has been around for what seems like forever, causing major outbreaks throughout the millennia and continuing to spread at high rates globally into today. When it comes to diagnostic testing, some tests like RPR and VDRL have stood the test of time, having been implemented in the late 1930s and 1940s, and are now used in combination with contemporary methods like EIAs and chemiluminescent assays as the reference standard method to diagnose syphilis cases. New approaches to screening and diagnosis are needed, however, to increase test access and ultimately case identification and treatment. Welcome to Editors in Conversation. Please subscribe to this podcast and rate or review it. This episode is brought to you by the Journal of Clinical Microbiology, available at asm.org/JCM. I'm your co-host, JCM editor Elli Theel. Editors in Conversation is supported by the American Society for Microbiology, which publishes JCM. If you're a member of ASM, you can get up to 50% off of publication fees when you publish in JCM or any of the ASM journals. And I am, of course, joined by co-host and JCM editor-in-chief, Romney Humphries, who I know is just pumped to talk about syphilis and all of the serology that goes with it. Am I right?
I am so excited about this, Ellie. I actually made you a picture to celebrate the art of serology testing. And so I know not everyone is online, but if you're on YouTube, you can see this. But this is what I imagine happens at the Mayo Clinic in your lab, Ellie. So maybe you can describe it for the audience, what's going on.
It is incredible. So it's kind of Harry Potter-ish, I think. I have a hat. There's a black cat and a gray rabbit. There's antibodies and female symbols floating in the sky.
Looks like a tarot card.
It's a tarot card. That's right.
It's a tarot card. Yes.
Yes, and it's a serologist. I love it. This is so awesome.
So like there really is magic in like floating antibodies when you do
yes,
this, right? Like don't burst my bubble. This is what it really looks like.
Oh, absolutely. My the staff in my lab are trained in magic as part of their competency.
So lucky. All
right. This is great. This is great. So to take us on a syphilitic adventure, we have two guests with us today. We're joined by Dr. Kevin Clark, who is co-founder and lead scientist at Now Diagnostics, which recently got a new syphilis test FDA approved, and we'll discuss that today. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then we are also joined by Dr. Jody Berry, who is the Chief Scientific Officer at Now Diagnostics and is also the senior author on the study we'll talk about today. Jody, we're excited to have you on as well.
Pleasure to be here. And just to add two more names to your list, one is Edward Teach, or Blackbeard. And the other one
Blackbeard?
is Louis Riel is another one.
Louis Riel, that's a true Canadian one. Thank you, Jody. My father is going to be very excited. You've just given him a reason to listen to the podcast.
All the bad men were bad men.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. We're expanding our podcast. Wonderful. So before we start, I have to ask, did you guys know that all of those historical figures had some form of syphilis?
No.
Yeah.
Anybody surprised? Which one surprised you the most? Romney, go first.
Okay. So like, I'm going to say Louis Riel. I did not realize that he had syphilis. Most American listeners are going to have no idea who I'm talking about, but
I'd say Blackbeard too, because he didn't live very long. So
yeah. I mean, that was kind of understandable, right? Like pirates. Yeah. What did they get up to?
Yeah.
I think the only one I didn't know was Rial, and Jody told me about it. being Canadian. He was excited.
Okay, for the non-Canadians, who is this person?
Jody?
He is the leader of if you're a French Métis, he's the savior of French rights and Métis rights, or if you're English, he's the leader of the rebellion against the English back in early Canada. It was the biggest war in Canada.
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. When I was in middle school, my father drug us to go see the battle site, and it was one of the most boring days of my entire childhood. But I have a better appreciation of it now.
In comparison to American wars, it's like 6 people hit each other with sticks. It was over.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. See,
All right.
syphilis bringing us all together. All together.
It's the human condition.
The human condition.
Everyone has experienced it in history.
Okay, so getting back into it, you guys are here to talk about your new manuscript, and I think we can just dive right in.
Yeah.
Romney?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So Kevin, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. And I think it would be good to set the stage a bit. As Elli mentioned, we often think of syphilis as sort of this historical affliction, but depending on where you live in the world, you may be privileged enough that you don't think of it as something that is all that prevalent. So I'm curious, can you kind of set the stage for us? What's the current epidemiology of syphilis in the US as well as globally?
I think it's been spreading on the rise. The prevalence has just gone through the roof here lately, and it's continuing to grow. And that it's obviously coming from unprotected sex. But I also think that the new PrEP treatments are starting to make they're taking the concern off of HIV, and so there's more unprotected sex there as well. Jody, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers are astounding. PrEP definitely is involved. Just unsafe procedures. People think that HIV is over. So onward they go because they can get treatment now for lifelong survival for most people with ARTs, and they're not too worried about a little bacterial infection. That they don't realize that about 60% of people are asymptomatic.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing that is particularly striking that I've seen recently is the big increase in neonatal syphilis cases, which is really tragic, right? I mean, that is something that should be fully avoidable. But unfortunately, at least in my neck of the woods in Tennessee, we do see quite a bit of that.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a challenge still today. So, Jody, can you refresh us briefly on what the recommended testing approach is for syphilis, really focusing on the clinical labs currently? So what is our kind of the reference standard method? But then also if you could talk about some of the limitations or challenges or gaps in what testing we currently have available.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the traditional way to test for syphilis, if you go see your physician, you have some symptoms, and they take some samples, and they send them to the lab for an RPR test, it's called, which is a non-specific, non-treponemal test that measures basically antibody and inflammation going on in the body. The treponeme involved in syphilis is really good at turning your immune system on generally. And so it produces antibodies to cardiolipin and also to cholesterol non-specifically. And so that was normally the first wave of testing a doctor would do. And if you were positive there or high titer there, then they would reflex to the treponemal test. Today, most doctors are actually doing it in reverse. They're actually testing for treponemal antibody first and then going to RPR. We got a lot of questions about that from the editors. And how we came up with our compound standard that was required by the FDA for this test. And essentially, we had to do 2 treponemal tests and an RPR to make them, satisfied that it was safe by self-use in our test, which worked out really well. And then how a physician comes back to their test is if they see a 1 in 4 decrease in the RPR response weeks after antibiotic treatment, then they'll conclude in reverse that yes, you did have syphilis. The problem with this and the limitations of this is you're requiring people to have multiple visits to the doctor. And we know that in a lot of clinics, people are lost to the physician after the first visit. And a lot of physicians are telling us that they use our test as a front line. And if somebody's positive, they treat immediately as opposed to determining if they really have syphilis or not. They might have had it 2 years ago and they're antibody positive, but they don't take the chance, especially if it's, a 19-year-old pregnant female that they might not get back in the clinic. They'll go ahead and treat her immediately. So I think the more screening equals more possibilities of treatment thing is paying off.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the biggest challenges is really access to care. Like right now, for syphilis testing, you need to go to a site, a clinic, your provider, wherever, to have blood drawn, collected, sent to the lab for testing using a pretty extensive, frankly, algorithm. Most labs are doing the reverse syphilis screening algorithm, right? Starting with a Treponema test and going to the RPR. So it's really that access to care that you mentioned. That is a big gap given the ongoing outbreak. So
Yeah.
Well, I think also the stigma, being able to test on your own at home was critical. People love the idea of testing on their own before they decide, okay, and get the gumption up to go back to the physician.
Yeah. Yep. The stigma is huge, self-collection, home collection, which really kind of was spurred right by COVID, is really translating into more interest in this sort of approach for STIs in particular, given that stigma for
Absolutely.
coming in to the clinic. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So Jody, with all of these limitations with the traditional lab-based test, can you tell us a little bit about the now diagnostics assay and what led you guys to development of this assay and how you kind of see the future of this, type of testing in the care of patients with syphilis or suspected syphilis?
Certainly. Then I'll turn it over to Kevin. Just to, preface on this, I joined the company 3 years after the R&D was done, 2 years after the clinical trials were done. It was already submitted to the FDA. So I had the pleasure of interacting with the FDA and writing the manuscript, whereas Kevin did all the work in terms of development of the assay. It was locked by the time I got to the company, which is a great position to be in. But I think until we get testing up, we need to just keep going the way we're going. There's only about 8 million tests done a year in North America right now. And until we get it up to 30 million, according to the CDC, we won't be able to make progress on the epidemic. And once we do, though, then we need to look back in reverse. And Kevin and I have talked about this many times. Is there another test you could use to replace the RPR? Because there's a lot of problems with it, and the time delay and waiting for the titer to go down. Maybe it's a CRP test. Maybe it's some other non-specific marker of inflammation. But that would be a great solution to that.
And a little bit about our test. I mean, it was really all around the simplicity of the test, being able, that everyone could run the test, get laboratory quality results, and at a price point that everybody can afford. And so, our IPs all around the microfluidics of the little device, and then how the membranes are stacked in there to separate the cellular components away from the plasma portion of the blood. Everything is self-contained, so there's no buffers, nothing else need to be added. It's truly just a finger prick, touch the device to the drop of blood, fill it up, tap it once, lay it down on the table. 10 minutes later, you read it just like a pregnancy test. You get a control line that shows up that tells you the test ran and that it worked. And then if you get a second line there, it's a positive result. And, like I said, the microfluidics are all around this little design of how it's all put together. It's all about simplicity.
Yeah.
Simplicity of use.
Yeah. Kevin, let me ask you a question about that, right? So I always tell people who are developing kind of these patient tests or point of care tests that people will screw up a test in literally every
Yes.
way imaginable, in some ways that you would never think of.
Mm.
So how did you guys go about thinking through how to make it so simple that literally anybody could run it?
You're absolutely right. When we started doing our human factors testing, uh, here's a wild story. We started out with a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And so we pulled in 100 people to run the pregnancy test. They had to be naive to our test. We had like a 50% success rate. And when we went back and started watching the videos, what we realized, the 50% that failed were all the men that were testing. Because all of us men just dump it out and go, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And they didn't bother reading the instructions.
Yeah.
Not even how to open up the Lancet. And so we basically put together to keep everyone's attention to get through the IFU. We provide them a written one, but we also provided them a jot form, which was just these on their phone. They could watch the video and, next, oh yeah, I did that step, next. And they had to work their way through it. What we realized is if somebody does the test one, or if they watch the video, or if they've had the test done on them by somebody else, they have no problem running the test.
Mm-hmm.
They just got to get through the IFU.
Yeah.
And that's the real challenge. And men, we're the worst.
Well, I have to say, though, putting it on a phone feels like you're going to hit that really important demographic of like older teenagers to young adults who have their phones with them, attached at the hip no matter what they're doing. So
Yeah,
and it's got to be 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You got to get their attention and get it done and go to the next step.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. It has to be quick and fast because nobody has patience anymore. From what I'm seeing.
Yeah, the 8-sheet IFU days are long gone.
Yeah. Yes.
But Elli, let me ask you, last time you did a COVID test on yourself, did you read the instructions or did you just assume you knew how to do it?
I absolutely did not read the instructions.
Me neither.
That's because I knew how to do it. So.
Right? Oh, man.
Yeah.
I think as laboratorians, we'd be good at reading the SOP, but
no. I also don't follow instructions when I cook. I just know how to cook it. So.
Good for you.
Yep.
So it's not all the men. It's also the
no.
microbiologists.
It's also, All right. So thanks for taking us through the assay. It's a unique, I would say, design. But going into your study, you guys, for this manuscript in particular, really focused on clinical accuracy, and kind of as a first of its kind, you undertook a pretty hefty clinical trial. So can you tell us what that involved and what patient populations you looked at? And Kevin, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. With our pre-subs with the FDA, we realized what they wanted was an all-comers clinical trial. So they wanted, the average layperson to do this test. They needed to be naive to our test. They wanted us to recruit at retail centers like CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, all these different retail settings. They also, any place where you'd go buy it. They also allowed us to recruit at low prevalence clinics. So we couldn't go to the high prevalence clinics to do this. So we ended up with a very large all-comers clinical trial. I think, Jody, you'll have to help me out with the numbers, but we ended up running, I'm going to say it was over
1,270.
1,270, thank you. 1,270 patients. Our comparator was actually 3 tests. So it was a RPR, a TPPA, and then we used the Biorad Treponema test. And to get a true positive, we had to compare it to, you had to have 2 of those tests had to turn out positive to get a true positive. And so that was our comparator for our assay.
Yeah, I made a mistake there, and I didn't include the expectant mothers too. There was another 280, but by the end of the study, it was whittled down to 1,270 combined.
Yeah, the 1270 was just the all-comers part of the clinical trial. That doesn't include any of the flex studies. It doesn't include the, the latent stage and early stage. Those cohorts as well. That's just the all-comers.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, I think it was really awesome, I guess, that you included pregnant women in particular. I'm curious whether that was a request from the FDA or not, because one of the issues we see with syphilis testing in pregnant women, which is part of prenatal care, is because of those autoantibodies and everything else happening on in pregnant women, we do more frequently see false positive results in them. So I thought that was a really nice subset to include in the study.
Well, thank you. It was really our plan from the very beginning. The FDA loved it, said, yes, do this. That's great. So
very cool. Very nice.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I mean, and you've just outlaid a pretty complicated, big trial. So I can only imagine the logistics associated with that.
We had to get the geographic and the demographic dispersion. So we were all across the country.
You must have had like an army of study monitors.
We did.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, it is really great, right? Like to have that investment and really understand how something so practice changing like this works. So can you walk us through, Jody, what you guys found in your trial? Maybe walk us through the clinical trial results, kind of some of the highlights and kind of your what you expected and what you didn't expect to see.
Sure. I mean, there was a lot of diverse combinations of groups, as Kevin mentioned, including one that was a panel from the CDC, which is 125 patients who were clinically staged. So there's 4 stages of syphilis, the 4th being the last and the worst, and the neural damage occurs then. And we had to show that our test would pick up people that were at all stages. And, the panel performed really well. We got 100% on all 4 stages out of all the samples that were prepared by the CDC, which was really, really enlightening for us. And then we knew we had a good test.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Is that 100% sensitivity? Is that what you're talking about, or specificity?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, the test scored really well against the 2 benchtop analyzers. We ran about 93.4 in terms of sensitivity, and specificity was 99.5, which you can't do much better than that. And overall, the accuracy was 99%. We did have we had some invalids as well within the group. And as Kevin already gave it away, the largest source of invalids on our test is someone not reading the instructions. And there were certain sites. There were certain sites where we know that the people that were helping out running the study didn't tell the people to read the instructions. And those sites kind of had a higher percentage of invalids than the other sites, and that was the reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Was the trial designed such that they observed the patients performing the test, or did the patients go off and conduct the test kind of privately?
Kevin?
Yeah, they were not observed, but they did fill out a survey afterwards. And so, did you read the instructions?
How hard was it? Yeah.
You could definitely correlate that. No, I didn't read the instructions to an invalid.
Invalid rates. Makes sense.
It does.
So you mentioned we could just dive in a little bit more into the results. So you really focused on clinical accuracy, but one of the biggest issues we have with present day syphilis tests that are done in the clinical lab is that analytic specificity issue. And false positives and cross-reactivity with other spirochetal infections. EBV mono is like the worst thing ever when it comes to syphilis diagnostic testing and false positive results. So I don't think it was in your published study, but I'm just curious whether you guys did additional analytic specificity studies as part of the FDA trial and whether you saw similar causes of cross-reactivity and false positives with your assay to what we see in the clinical lab.
Yes, we sure did. We did a flex study that took like 10 patients or 20 patients of each. We did have like one EBV patient out of 10 show up and one rheumatoid factor.
Yeah.
We also found that really high gamma globulin could also cause a problem. But overall, the specificity, even in the flex study, in those, where you're running, I don't remember the exact number, but it was a whole bunch of possible cross reaction. Those two were the only two that came up, and they were 1 out of 10.
Yeah, so kind of similar from that perspective to some of our current assays then. And maybe if I could go back to something you said, Jody, earlier, you mentioned that in current use, you're finding that clinicians will treat solely based on results of this, screening test, if you will. Given that patients can be positive for treponemal antibodies for quite some time, and that might be representative of a past infection, are there any concerns about maybe that approach and whether we should be confirming these tests before treating? Or I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't encourage off-label usage like that, but
Yeah,
I'm assuming that they're also sending blood for an RPR test at the same time, but
sure.
that would be a concern. I mean, I guess relatively speaking, the administration of an antibiotic to somebody who doesn't need it is a little bit, more benign than having, congenital syphilis. So I guess that's what they're thinking in their mind. If they lose the patient, they're never going to see them again, and so they're going ahead and doing it. But coming back to our test and performance, it's in the supplementary information that you guys allowed us to publish. We had actually 44 out of 49 RPR positive samples we had were positive by our test too, which means that there was an incredible inflammation going on, and there was also an incredible antibody stimulation going on at that time. So we're not encouraging, we're not saying we're going to replace the RPR test by our test. We're a treponemal screening test, but it was quite remarkable. Anything over 1 in 8 titer, and it's in the data as well, we were positive for.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of eye-opening that a test can also pick that up.
Yeah. Yep.
So if I could ask, one thing I'm sure the listeners will be interested in for the indications for use, right? So Jody, you mentioned off-label use. So can you just walk through the intended use of the product? I mean, is the intention to have it as a screen and then have a patient visit a physician and get confirmatory testing, or?
Sure. I won't get all the wording accurate, but I don't have a few in front of me.
The gist of it.
It's intended for somebody who has symptoms or has cause to believe, like had sex with somebody who does have syphilis. And it says right in there, if you've had syphilis before, this test is not for you because you're going to be positive anyway. You need to go see your physician. And so it's really clearly spelled out on the box and on the IFU that this is a screening test and not meant for people that have already known to have it. For example, if you're a frequent attendee of a prep clinic, for example, you might have had syphilis a couple of times. They're not going to test you with this test. It's just not going to be helpful.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, that it's so hard to predict, right, how these things are going to change management of patients with these diseases. Elli and I are really interested in expanding access to diagnostic testing. I think this is like a fabulous tool in that regard. And as we've talked about, you guys did quite a robust study. I'm curious though, did you Maybe you could kind of go over what you see as the limitations of the study, or are there any things that you wish you had done or plan to do to further evaluate this test?
Jody, you want to take a shot at that one?
I mean, I don't really see any limitations for what it does. I mean, being the first over-the-counter syphilis test is a huge bar. There's only 4 basically tests that are approved over the counter. One is the OraSure HIV test, one is our syphilis test, and then there's COVID flu tests, which there's a lot of them out there. And so that's about it. Now VISB came along with their molecular test that's going to change the field as well.
Yeah.
But I don't really see any limitations for what we have. Combining it with other diseases is something we would like to look at. There's probably a lot of people that want to test for more than one disease at one time, and exposure. That's something we have percolating in our thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Did you test any pediatric patients in your study?
I think it was 12 and up. Is that right, Kevin?
12 and up. Yes, the FDA gave us 12 and up.
Okay.
Nice.
Great. Yeah.
So to Romney's point about increase in access, I think that's totally agree. I think this is a huge benefit. I'm curious if you guys can comment on what you feel might be the impact to clinical laboratories. So as an example, when this came out, the news broke, one of my colleagues came and said, hey, less syphilis testing for you. Your volumes are going to go down. So I won't share what I said, but what do you guys think about that? Do you foresee that for clinical labs? Are we going to see less syphilis testing?
I personally don't think so. I think we're going to see more. I mean,
that's what I think too.
I mean, we say, if you get a positive, go see your doctor.
Yeah.
And, hopefully having this kind of accessibility to it, retail locations, 14,000 retail locations around, and being able to have one show up in a smiley box on your front doorstep, hopefully it's going to drive, just more testing. That's been our feeling since the very beginning, is trying to get more testing done, and then send them to the doctor.
Yeah. And I foresee potentially more STI testing, because if you're at risk for syphilis, you're probably at risk for some other STIs as well. So it could engender or lead to additional screening, which is a nice bonus.
That's our goal, is to put more out, run some more, an entire panel.
Yeah.
I imagine you intend to do kind of post-market analysis as this is implemented to measure impact. And real world, that, like anything, right? You do your clinical trial, as big as it is, you get great data, but then there's always things that you learn as it gets implemented more and more as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's also challenging, given it's a self-test. It's kind of like COVID, where people don't report it back to anybody that nobody knows. But we're looking at some programs where by the addition of a label on the box, we might be able to have people call into one of these pre-set up here's my test result .com programs, which might be very helpful for physicians.
I would imagine so, because I guess the other thing that comes up, and I know we talked a lot about this with COVID home tests, is public health and tracking. And do you lose an element of that if people aren't going to get the follow-up testing done?
Yeah. Yep. More improvements to come. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, hopefully, if they get a positive result, they are going to go to the doctor. They're going to seek help at that point.
Yeah.
So
right.
I'm hoping it's drive. Our thought is it'll drive it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good point.
Cool.
Good point. Well, thank you, Kevin, for sharing your findings with us. And thank you, Jody, as well, for joining us today. It's been a really nice discussion.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
I do have a question for the group as an ending, another trivia. So where did the name syphilis come from?
Oh, I know this.
I don't.
Okay. Enlighten us, Elli.
So I believe it was from an Italian poet.
Yes, a poet / physician.
Yes, a physician
Makes me feel
poet.
like an underachiever.
Yeah, it was a poem he wrote about a shepherd that wasn't listening to God or something, or to one of, I don't know,
Yeah.
he wasn't listening to someone. And God, or was it Zeus? I don't know. I'm getting
God.
my,
It was
it was
God.
God. Okay. Getting my deities messed up here. He basically sent down to the human race the scourge of syphilis to everyone.
And the shepherd's
right?
name was Syphilis.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that guy, that poet, actually was probably the first person to come out with germ theory of disease. Believe it or not. We never
I did
even
not
talked
know
about
that.
him.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Cool.
very cool. I was wondering about that, and I'm
Mhm.
glad you had the answer. I shouldn't have expected any less, Elli.
Syphilis may be my favorite one, my favorite bacteria, but I digress.
All right.
Well, Romney, good to see you.
good to see
Any
you too.
hints about next month's topic?
Well, I think the listeners will just have to kind of wait and see. We do have a podcast coming out on AI in the micro lab, a mini one.
Excellent.
So that'll be fun. And then, we'll come back with our sort of normal scheduled programming with the next article shortly after that. So,
Yeah, I like the mini podcasts. Those are fun. Nice work.
Thanks.
All right. Well, until then, thank you everyone for listening. Please share the podcast with friends and colleagues, and we look forward to everyone joining us again next month.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.